It's Thursday, April 4. This is the news on PBCJ. I am Simone Absalom. $100 million in loans have been approved for the Ministry of Health from the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB. The loans will fund the health system's strengthening for the prevention and care management of NCD's program. The program aims to improve the health of Jamaica's population by bolstering policies for the prevention of non-communicable diseases, risk factors, and implementation of a chronic care model. Portfolio Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton and Chief of Operations IDB in Jamaica, Adriana Lavalle, signed the loan agreement this week. While speaking at the event, the health minister sounded the warning that stricter regulations on foods high in trans and saturated fats and sodium, as well as for tobacco and alcohol products, are on the horizon. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Audrey Sowell, has called for greater private sector partnerships in developing initiatives aimed at strengthening climate change adaptation locally and regionally. She said the impact of climate change is threatening the stability and security of Jamaica, and its Caribbean partners must act collectively to reverse the tide. Ms. Sowell was speaking at the opening day of the three-day Green Climate Fund Caribbean Private Sector Engagement Workshop at the Hilton Rose Hall Resort in Montego Bay, St. James on Tuesday. She noted that the ministry has facilitated grant funding to enable private sector entities to undertake climate change mitigation and adaptation projects. The regional workshop was organized by the ministry in association with the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, PSOJ, and the GCF. The event included discussions aimed at promoting funding, working strategies, and partnerships that will mobilize the private sector to support low-carbon and climate-resilient development in Jamaica and other CARICOM states. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, Carol Palmer, on Tuesday told the Public Accounts Committee that since she took up the post, it has become clear that the ministry does not have direct access to information out of Petrojam or its parent company, the Petroleum Corporation of Jamaica.
The assessment and review that has been done demonstrates that the ministry does not have any representation on the board. It was a Venezuela PCJ board, and therefore there was no direct access to information out of Petrojam or indeed PCJ, and a full assessment of our 14 entities with boards show that the ministry only has representation on 8 of those boards, and Petrojam and PCJ are not included. Efforts are now being made as we seek to establish new boards, that situation is regularized, because the ministry will have to have capacity to be at board meetings so that we can know what is happening at one level, and also to provide the required reporting to both the permanent secretary and onward to the minister to ensure that the requirements of the law and corporate governance are being adhered to.
The PAC was reviewing the Auditor General's report into the operations of the entities, including updates and responses from the PCJ since the publication of the audit last December. Palmer informed the committee that she intends to make representation to the Ministry of Finance on the structure of MSET, as it does not now have the capacity to properly provide oversight of the entities under its purview. Residents of Eastern Portland head to the polls today to elect a new Member of Parliament. The choices on the ballot are the People's National Party's Damian Crawford and the Jamaica Labour Party's Anne-Marie Vaz. The brief campaign between these candidates has been marred by inflammatory statements, retractions apologies, and even accusations of classism and, more recently, gun violence. The seat is traditionally viewed as a safe seat for the PMP. However, recent polling have shown a possible reversal of this trend. The by-election became necessary when incumbent Member of Parliament Dr. Linvale Bloomfield was killed on February 2. A person of interest has been held in connection with the murder. 7,000 native or descended Jamaicans may be beneficiaries of a portion of the $200 million Windrush compensation scheme. About 60 Jamaicans were deported or barred from returning to the United Kingdom on the pretext of not being British nationals, even though many had been welcomed when post-war Britain sought workers to aid in its reconstruction. The scheme is open to persons from any nationality who have the right to live or work in the UK without any restrictions, or are now British citizens and arrived in the UK before December 31, 1988. Motorists should see an increase at the pumps in the price of gasoline and diesel effective today, April 4. That's according to the latest ex-refinery costs from Petrojam. 87 and 90 octane gasoline will be sold for $131.18 and $134.02 per liter respectively, up by 16 cents each. Automotive diesel fuel will be sold for $131.34 per liter, following an increase of 26 cents, while ultra-low sulfur diesel is up by 73 cents and will be sold for $135.27 per liter. Kerosene increased in price by 27 cents and will be sold for $109.22 per liter. Remember, marketing companies and retailers will add their respective markup to these prices. The US dollar on Wednesday ended trading at Jamaican $127.85, up by 27 cents. According to the Bank of Jamaica's daily foreign exchange trading summary, the Canadian dollar ended trading at Jamaican $94, down from $97.03, while the British pound sterling ended trading at Jamaican $166.14, up from $164.30. In regional news, the Cayman Islands government yesterday said it would appeal a ruling last week by Chief Justice Anthony Smelly that the definition of marriage as between a man and a woman was unconstitutional and violated multiple rights. Premier Alden McLaughlin told legislators, quote, "Mr. Speaker, let me say here that in appealing, the government is cognizant that there is no guarantee or certainty as to how the Court of Appeal will rule. However, we believe it is critical that the country has the benefit of clarification on these very important constitutional issues." End quote. The Premier said while a challenge to the ruling is certainly not a decision to be taken lightly, given the important human rights concerns raised in the case, the ruling of the Chief Justice has brought about significant ambiguity surrounding the Constitution and Bill of Rights and the interpretation of and ability of the court to amend other laws should similar applications be made. In the meantime, the opposition says it supports the Cayman government's stance to support the opposition with leader Ezard Miller. Speaking on Tuesday before the Premier made his ruling, Miller said the move to legalize same-sex marriage has deeper implications for the authority of the Parliament.
Because I believe it has potential to reduce the authority of the Legislative Assembly to write laws for good governance and placing it on the bench of a judge, which I don't believe it belongs.
On Tuesday, the British Home Secretary Sajid Javid announced that the government will pay up to $200 million in compensation to people whose lives were damaged by the Home Office's mistaken classification of thousands of long-term British residents as illegal immigrants. The announcement comes almost a year after the government admitted that its treatment of Windrush generation had been appalling. The Home Secretary said there would be no cap on the fund, making it impossible to estimate how much money will eventually be paid to victims. Payments will be restricted to people from the Caribbean, but made to anyone who has been in the UK since 1988, who has been wrongly classified as being there illegally and as a result lost the rights to work, access to healthcare and the ability to rent property.
And I sincerely hope that this compensation scheme being unveiled today goes some way into doing that. It has taken longer than I would have liked. But if we are to deliver justice for the Windrush generation and their families, it is vital that we get this right. Today's scheme is the product of many months of work with affected individuals and their representatives, including well over 2,000 responses to our call for evidence and the consultation.
In Venezuela, Venezuela will leave the Organization of American States by April 27. We have more in this report.
Venezuela's ambassador to the UN, Samuel Moncada, accused the head of the organization, Luis Almagro, of seeking to bypass the necessary 24 votes in the General Assembly to request an invasion for humanitarian reasons. He said the Organization of American States cannot unilaterally recognize governments or allow other countries like the US to impose its recognition on other nations. He said that the Monroe Doctrine promotes international chaos and it's a clear violation of every country's sovereignty. Moncada said, quote, "Trump will never defeat the ideas of our liberators. We will always be an independent, free, and sovereign nation."
In sports, President of the Jamaica Football Federation, Michael Ricketts, stated that members of the country's national senior women's team, the Reggae Girls, were scheduled to receive outstanding incentive payments this week for their historic FIFA Women's World Cup qualification. Ricketts, who was en route to South Africa, where the team is engaged in a one-week training camp ahead of a friendly international with the hosts on Sunday, also told the press that he's expecting a resolution to the long-standing contract dispute with the girls. Jamaica qualified for the FIFA Women's World Cup, which will take place in France from June 7 to July 7, becoming the first Caribbean team to achieve the feat. And that's the news on PBCJ. I'm Simone Absalom. Pleasant viewing.